she screamed loudly on her first night with Black Billionaire. I never believed in fate. I never believed that one moment could change everything, that a single decision could rewrite the entire trajectory of your life. But standing here now, looking back at everything that happened, I realize how naive I was. How completely, utterly unprepared I was for what was coming. My name is Evelyn Carter, and 6 months ago, I was nothing. Nobody. Just another broke 26-year-old drowning in student debt, working double shifts at a restaurant downtown where the tips were mediocre and the customers were worse. I shared a cramped apartment with 2 roommates who were never home, ate ramen noodles for nights a week, and called my mother every Sunday to lie about how well I was doing. Everything's great, Mom, I would say, staring at the eviction notice taped to my refrigerator. I'm really making it here in the city. The truth was, I was falling apart. The truth was, I cried myself to sleep more nights than I care to admit. The truth was, I had given up on my dreams of becoming a writer so long ago that I could barely remember what hope felt like. But that was before him. Before the night that changed everything. Before I screamed. It was a Tuesday when my life took its first unexpected turn. I remember because Tuesdays were always the worst shifts at the restaurant, slow enough that the tips were pathetic, but busy enough that my feet ached by the end of the night. I was carrying a tray of drinks to table 7 when I tripped. I don't even know what I tripped on my own feet, probably, or maybe the universe just decided it was time for everything to change. Whatever the reason, I went flying forward, and the tray of drinks went with me. Time seemed to slow down. I watched in horror as 4 glasses of expensive wine sailed through the air in a perfect arc, heading directly toward the man sitting alone at the corner table. The man in the perfectly tailored suit. The man who looked like he had never experienced a single moment of clumsiness in his entire life. The wine hit him square in the chest. All 4 glasses. Red wine, spreading across his white shirt like a crime scene. I hit the ground hard, my knees slamming against the marble floor. For a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at the mess I had made, at the shattered glasses, at the wine pooling on the floor, at the man who was now standing up slowly, his shirt completely ruined. I'm so sorry, I gasped, scrambling to my feet. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the dry cleaning. I'll pay for everything. Please, I'm so sorry. Stop. His voice cut through my panic like a knife. Deep. Commanding. The kind of voice that made you freeze in place and listen. I looked up at him for the first time. And that's when the world stopped spinning. He was tall, at least 6'3", with broad shoulders and a physique that suggested he spent serious time in the gym. His skin was a rich, deep brown, flawless and smooth. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and his cheekbones were works of art. But it was his eyes that caught me. Dark brown, almost black, with an intensity that made me feel like he could see straight through me. He was, without question, the most beautiful man I had ever seen in my life. And I had just ruined his very expensive shirt. I'm sorry, I whispered again, my voice barely audible. He looked down at his shirt, then back at me. His expression was unreadable. I waited for the anger, for the yelling, for the demand to speak to my manager that would inevitably get me fired. But instead, he smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, just a slight curve of his full lips. But it transformed his entire face. Made him look almost amused. It's just a shirt, he said. I blinked. What? I said, it's just a shirt. He reached up and undid the top button, completely casual, as if having wine thrown at him by clumsy waitresses was a regular occurrence. Are you hurt? Was I hurt? He was the one covered in wine, and he was asking if I was hurt? No, I'm fine, I managed. But your shirt? I have others. Before I could respond, my manager appeared. Roberto, a short man with a permanent scowl and a Napoleon complex that made him insufferable on good days. Miss Carter, he hissed, grabbing my arm. What have you done? Do you have any idea who this is? I shook my head, still dazed. Roberto's face went pale. This is Damien Blackwood. Damien Blackwood. Owner of Blackwood Industries. His worth. Roberto stopped himself, probably realizing it was tacky to discuss someone's net worth while they were standing right there. But I had already heard enough. Blackwood Industries. The tech empire that had revolutionized artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and about a dozen other industries. The company that had been on the cover of every business magazine for the past 3 years. And I had just thrown wine on its owner. The billionaire. I'm so sorry, Mr. Blackwood, Roberto gushed, practically bowing. This will never happen again. She will be dealt with immediately. Your meal is on the house, of course, Anne. That won't be necessary, Damien interrupted, his eyes still on me. It was an accident. And I believe I was in the way. But sir. I said it's fine. His tone left no room for argument. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should probably go change. He pulled out his wallet and dropped several bills on the table, far more than his meal could have possibly cost. Then, without another word, he walked past me toward the exit. But just before he reached the door, he stopped. Turned back. Our eyes met across the restaurant. What's your name? He asked. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear myself think. Evelyn. Evelyn Carter. He nodded slowly, as if filing the information away somewhere important. Evelyn Carter. I'll remember that. And then he was gone. I thought that was the end of it. A humiliating story I would tell at parties someday, once enough time had passed that it was funny instead of mortifying. Remember that time I threw wine on a billionaire? Yeah, that was me. But 3 days later, something arrived at the restaurant. A box. Not just any box, a white box with gold trim, the kind that expensive things came in. My name was written on a card attached to the top in elegant handwriting. What is this? I asked Roberto, who had handed it to me with a suspicious look. It was delivered this morning. For you, apparently. I opened the box with shaking hands. Inside was a dress. The most beautiful dress I had ever seen in my life. It was deep burgundy, the color of the wine I had spilled, with delicate beading along the bodice and a flowing skirt that looked like it was made of liquid silk. When I lifted it out of the box, it caught the light in ways that made it seem almost alive. There was a card underneath. Consider this an apology for ruining your evening. There's a charity gala tomorrow night at the Blackwood Tower. I would be honored if you would join me. A car will pick you up at 7 p.m. DB. I read the card 3 times. Then 3 more times. A charity gala. At Blackwood Tower. With the billionaire. Is this a joke? I whispered. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. The dress in my hands was worth more than 6 months of my rent. This was real. This was happening. And I had absolutely no idea what to do. I almost didn't go. I spent the entire next day convincing myself it was a terrible idea. He was a billionaire. I was a waitress. We came from different worlds, different universes. What could he possibly want with someone like me? But then I looked at the dress. I thought about my cramped apartment, my dead-end job, my dreams that had withered and died somewhere along the way. And I thought, what do I have to lose? At 6:45 p.m., I was standing in front of my mirror, wearing the dress that fit like it had been made specifically for my body. My dark curly hair was pinned up in a style I had learned from YouTube tutorials, and I had borrowed makeup from my roommate who was never home anyway. I barely recognized myself. At exactly 7 p.m., a black car pulled up outside my building. The driver opened the door for me, and I slid into the back seat like I belonged there. 20 minutes later, we arrived at Blackwood Tower. I had seen pictures of it, of course. Everyone had. The 90-story skyscraper that dominated the city skyline, all glass and steel and architectural brilliance. But pictures didn't do it justice. Standing at its base, looking up at its impossible height, I felt like an ant approaching a mountain. Miss Carter. I turned. A woman in an elegant black suit was standing at the entrance, tablet in hand. Mr. Blackwood is expecting you. Please, follow me. We entered the building and crossed a lobby that was bigger than my entire apartment complex. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Marble floors gleamed beneath our feet. Men and women in expensive clothes milled about, champagne glasses in hand, their laughter echoing off the walls. I didn't belong here. Every cell in my body was screaming that I didn't belong here. But I kept walking. The woman led me to a private elevator. She pressed a button, and we began to ascend. 10th floor. 20th. 30th. My ears popped. My heart raced. 60th floor. 70th. 80th. Finally, the elevator stopped. The doors opened. And there he was. Damien Blackwood was standing at the window of what appeared to be his private office, looking out at the city below. He was wearing a black suit this time, perfectly tailored, with a burgundy tie that matched my dress. He had planned this. Every detail. You came, he said, turning to face me. His expression was difficult to read, surprised, maybe? Pleased? I couldn't tell. You invited me, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. It would have been rude to refuse. A smile flickered across his face. That same almost smile from the restaurant. You look beautiful, he said. The dress suits you. It's too much. I can't accept something this expensive. You already have. He walked toward me slowly, like a predator approaching prey. But there was no menace in his movements, only interest. Do you know why I invited you here tonight, Evelyn? My name on his lips sent shivers down my spine. I assume you're going to tell me. I watched you that night at the restaurant. Before you fell. Before the wine. I watched you for almost an hour. My breath caught. What? The way you treated every customer. The way you smiled even when they were rude to you. The way you helped that elderly woman to her table when no one else noticed she was struggling. He was standing right in front of me now, so close I could smell his cologne, something rich and warm and intoxicating. In my world, authenticity is rare. Kindness is even rarer. And you had both. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever looked at me the way he was looking at me now. Like I was something precious. Something valuable. The gala is about to begin, he said softly. Will you be my date? I should have said no. I should have run as far and as fast as I could. Instead, I said yes. The gala was everything I had imagined and more. Hundreds of the city's wealthiest and most influential people, all gathered under one roof, all there to raise money for children's education or something equally noble. I spent the evening on Damien's arm, being introduced to CEOs and politicians and celebrities, all of whom looked at me with barely concealed curiosity. Who is she? There I seemed to ask. Where did she come from? I asked myself the same questions. But Damien never left my side. He treated me like I belonged there, like I had always belonged there. When people spoke to me condescendingly, he shut them down with a single look. When I felt overwhelmed, he sensed it before I could say anything and guided me somewhere quiet to catch my breath. You're doing wonderfully, he told me during one of these moments, his hand warm on the small of my back. I don't know why you're doing this, I admitted. I don't know what you want from me. His eye searched mine. What if I just want you? Before I could respond, someone called his name. A business matter that required his attention. He excused himself with obvious reluctance, promising to return in 5 minutes. I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, trying to process everything that was happening. That's when I heard it. A voice behind me. Female. Dripping with venom. So you're the flavor of the month. I turned. A woman stood there, tall, stunning, with model-perfect features and a designer dress that probably cost more than my car. Her dark hair was slicked back, and her eyes were cold as ice. "Excuse me. Don't play dumb with me." She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the floor. "I know exactly what you are. Another gold digger who saw an opportunity and jumped. How long did it take you to throw yourself at him? Did you plan the wine thing, or was that just a happy accident?" I felt like I had been slapped. "I don't know who you are, but I'm Victoria Stone, Damien's fiancée." The word hit me like a physical blow. Fiancé. He had a fiancée. "Oh, he didn't tell you." Victoria smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That's typical. He does this, you know. Picks up strays. Showers them with attention. Makes them feel special. And then, when he's bored." She snapped her fingers. "Gone. Forgotten. Like they never existed." "You're lying," I whispered, but even as I said it, doubt was creeping in. "Am I?" She held up her left hand. On her ring finger was the biggest diamond I had ever seen. "We've been engaged for 2 years. The wedding is in 3 months. This," she gestured at me, at my dress, at everything, "is just another distraction. Another toy to play with before he settles down." I couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in. "You should leave," Victoria continued. "Save yourself the humiliation. Because trust me, sweetie, you are way out of your league." She walked away, leaving me standing there, shattered. I should have waited for Damien to come back. I should have confronted him, demanded answers. But I couldn't. The humiliation was too raw, too overwhelming. I had been a fool. A naive, stupid fool who had actually believed that a billionaire could be interested in someone like me. I found the elevator. Pressed the button. Fled. By the time I got home, I was crying so hard I could barely see. I tore off the beautiful dress and threw it on the floor. I took off the borrowed makeup and let myself be exactly who I was, a broken woman who should have known better. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Where did you go?" "Damien." I didn't respond. It buzzed again. And again. And again. I turned off my phone. The next few days were miserable. I called in sick to work, too humiliated to face Roberto and his inevitable questions. I stayed in my apartment, wallowing in self-pity, replaying every moment of that night and wondering how I had been so blind. On the 4th day, there was a knock at my door. "Go away!" I shouted. "Evelyn! Please! Open the door!" His voice. Damien's voice. I froze. "I know you're in there," he continued. "I know you're angry. But I can explain. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I have nothing to say to you." "Then don't say anything. Just listen. 5 minutes. That's all I ask. And then if you want me to leave, I'll leave. I'll never bother you again." I should have said no. Every instinct was screaming at me to say no. But I opened the door. He looked terrible. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usually impeccable suit was wrinkled. His face was raw with exhaustion and something else, something that looked almost like pain. "Victoria," I said flatly. "Your fiancée. I met her." He flinched like I had struck him. "I know. She told me. So it's true." "No." He stepped forward, his eyes desperate. "Listen to me, Evelyn. Yes, there is an engagement. But it's not real. It's not what you think." "It's not real?" "She's wearing a ring the size of a small country. It's a business arrangement," he said. "My father set it up before he died. A merger between our family's companies. If I don't marry her, Blackwood Industries loses everything. Thousands of people lose their jobs. Everything my father built crumbles. I stared at him, trying to process his words. I don't love her, he continued, his voice breaking. I've never loved her. It's always been a transaction, nothing more. She knows it. I know it. Everyone knows it. Then why didn't you tell me? Because for one night, I wanted to pretend. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face like he wanted to touch me but was afraid I would pull away. When I'm with you, I forget about the obligations. The expectations. The prison I've built around myself. You make me feel human. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. Please, he whispered. I know I have no right to ask. But please give me a chance. Let me prove that what I feel for you is real. I looked into his eyes. Those dark, intense eyes that had captivated me from the first moment. And against every ounce of common sense I possessed, I nodded. The following weeks were like something out of a dream. Damien courted me in ways I had never imagined possible. Private dinners at restaurants that didn't appear on any map. Weekend trips to islands I couldn't pronounce. Gifts that I kept trying to refuse until he pointed out that refusing them hurt him more than accepting them ever could. But it wasn't the luxury that drew me in. It was him. The late-night conversations where he told me about his childhood, about the father who had loved him but pushed him too hard, about the mother who had died when he was 12 and left a hole that never healed. The way he listened when I talked about my own dreams, my writing, the stories I wanted to tell but had never had the courage to pursue. You should write them, he said one night, as we lay on a beach somewhere in the Caribbean, stars stretched out above us like a blanket of diamonds. I wouldn't know where to start. Start at the beginning. Start with once upon a time. Start with whatever words come to you. Just start. I turned to look at him. Why do you believe in me so much? He smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. Because I see you, Evelyn. Not the waitress. Not the broke girl struggling to survive. I see the woman who helps elderly strangers without expecting anything in return. I see the woman who finds beauty in the small things. I see someone extraordinary who doesn't know she's extraordinary. He reached out and brushed a curl from my face. And I want to be the one who shows her. That was the night I realized I was falling in love with him. 1 month later, Damien invited me to spend the weekend at his private estate outside the city. A sprawling mansion surrounded by acres of forest, with a staff of 20 and amenities that rivaled most 5-star hotels. Are you sure about this? I asked as the car wound its way up the long driveway. He took my hand. I've never been more sure of anything. The estate was breathtaking. Every room was more beautiful than the last. He showed me the library, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and antique furniture. He showed me the gardens, with their manicured hedges and fountain that sparkled in the afternoon sun. He showed me the pool, the tennis courts, the stables. But it was the bedroom that made me stop. A massive 4-poster bed dominated the space, covered in silk sheets the color of cream. Candles lined the window sills, casting a warm glow. Rose petals were scattered across the floor. He had prepared this. All of this? Damien. I breathed. He came up behind me, his arms wrapping around my waist. I want tonight to be special, he murmured against my ear. I want to show you how much you mean to me. My heart was racing. We had kissed before, many times, but we had never taken it further. I had been scared. He had been patient. But standing there, in that beautiful room, with his body warm against mine, I knew I was ready. Show me, I whispered. He turned me around. His eyes locked onto mine. And then he kissed me. It was different from all the other kisses. Deeper. More urgent. His hands tangled in my hair as my arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer. Years of loneliness, of doubt, of feeling like I would never be enough, it all melted away in that moment. He guided me toward the bed. Slowly. Reverently. Like I was something precious. And then I screamed. Not a scream of pleasure. A scream of horror. Because as Damien's body pressed against mine, I saw something that made my blood run cold. On his shoulder blade, partially hidden by his shirt, was a tattoo. A symbol I had seen before. A symbol that haunted my nightmares. I pushed him off me with a strength I didn't know I possessed, scrambling backward until I hit the headboard. Evelyn? Damien's face was confused, concerned. What's wrong? Did I hurt you? The tattoo, I gasped. On your shoulder. Where did you get it? He touched his shoulder reflexively. This? It's a family symbol. The Blackwood crest. My father had it, and his father before him. Why? What's wrong? My entire body was shaking. That symbol. I've seen it before. Where? I closed my eyes, and the memory came flooding back. The memory I had spent 20 years trying to forget. I was 6 years old. My father had taken me to the park for the first time in months. He had been distant lately, distracted, but that day he was focused entirely on me. We played on the swings. We fed the ducks. He bought me ice cream and told me I was his favorite girl in the whole world. And then they came. Men in black suits. 3 of them. They appeared out of nowhere, surrounding us. My father's face went pale. Not in front of her, he pleaded. Please, not in front of her. But they didn't listen. One of them grabbed me. I screamed for my father. I screamed until my throat was raw. But they wouldn't let me go. They made me watch as the other 2 took my father. As they dragged him away. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was a symbol on the wrist of the man holding me. The same symbol that was now tattooed on Damien's shoulder. My father, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He disappeared when I was 6. The police said he ran away. Abandoned us. But that wasn't true. He was taken. And the men who took him had that symbol. Damien's face had gone grey. Evelyn, what are you saying? Your family. Your precious Blackwood crest. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. They took my father. Your family destroyed my life. No. He shook his head violently. That's not possible. The crest is just a symbol. A tradition. Don't lie to me. I screamed. I remember that symbol. I've been seeing it in my nightmares for 20 years. Every therapist I've ever seen has tried to convince me I imagined it, but I didn't. I know what I saw. Damien was silent for a long moment. His face went through a series of emotions, shock, denial, realization, before finally settling on something that looked horrifyingly like guilt. My father, he said slowly, was not a good man. I waited, barely breathing. I didn't know it when I was younger. To me, he was just Dad. Strict but loving. Successful. Admired. But as I got older, he trailed off, running a hand through his hair. There were secrets. Things I wasn't supposed to know about. Rooms in the house I wasn't allowed to enter. Conversations that stopped the moment I walked in. What kind of secrets? Blackwood Industries wasn't just a tech company in the beginning. In my grandfather's time, and my father's early years, they were involved in things. Terrible things. Illegal things. His voice was hollow. Extortion. Blackmail. And when those didn't work, people disappeared. Rivals. Enemies. Anyone who got in the way. The room was spinning. And my father? What did he do? What did he do to make him a target? Damien closed his eyes. I don't know. I swear to you, I don't know. By the time I took over the company, those practices had ended. I made sure of it. I spent years cleaning up my family's legacy, trying to bury the sins of the past. But I never knew the details. I never knew who. Find out. He looked at me. If you care about me at all, I said, find out what happened to my father. Find out where they took him. Find out if he's still alive. Evelyn. Promise me. He took a deep breath. Then he nodded. I promise. The next few weeks were agonizing. Damien threw every resource he had into the search: private investigators, forensic accountants, data analysts who combed through decades of sealed records. Victoria's engagement was publicly postponed amid rumors of trouble in paradise, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was my father. Was he alive? Was he dead? And if he was dead, what had they done to him? The answers, when they came, were worse than anything I had imagined. His name was Robert Carter, Damien said, sitting across from me in his office, a thick folder in his hands. His face was ashen. He was an accountant. He worked for a firm that was hired to audit a subsidiary of Blackwood Industries in the late 90s. And he found something. Evidence of the illegal activities. Money laundering, bribery, worse. He planned to go to the authorities. My heart clenched. He was going to expose them. Yes. And my father couldn't allow that. Damien's voice cracked. So he gave the order. Your father was taken. Eliminated, they called it. The word hung in the air between us, ugly and final. Eliminated. My father was dead. Had been dead for 20 years. And the man I loved was the son of the man who killed him. I'm so sorry, Damien whispered. I'm so sorry. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Couldn't process the magnitude of what I was hearing. There's more, he continued, his voice barely audible. I looked up. There's a witness. Someone who was there that night. Someone who's still alive. Who? He hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw something that terrified me. Who, Damien? Victoria. Victoria Stone had been there. Victoria Stone had known everything. And Victoria Stone had been using that knowledge to control Damien for years. She found out about my father's activities when we were teenagers, Damien explained, pacing his office like a caged animal. She used it as leverage. Threatened to expose everything unless I agreed to the engagement. She's been blackmailing me ever since. Why didn't you tell the authorities yourself? Because exposure would destroy everything. The company. The thousands of jobs. My father's legacy, he stopped himself. My father's legacy. I was protecting a murderer's legacy. Do you understand now? Do you understand why I'm just as guilty as he was? I looked at him, really looked at him. At the weight he had been carrying. At the prison he had built around himself, brick by brick, trying to hold together something that was rotten at its core. We need to talk to Victoria, I said. She'll never tell us anything. Then we make her. The confrontation happened at Victoria's penthouse. She opened the door with a smirk, clearly expecting Damien to come crawling back. Her smirk faded when she saw me. What is she doing here? We know everything, I said, pushing past her into the apartment. We know about Robert Carter. We know you were there that night. And we know you've been blackmailing Damien for years. Victoria's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. I remember you. 20 years ago, there was a woman at the park that day. Dark hair. Cold eyes. She stood off to the side while the men took my father. She watched the whole thing. Victoria's hands were shaking. You can't prove anything. I don't need to prove it. I just need you to tell me the truth. I pulled out my phone. This conversation is being recorded. And it's being live-streamed to a very interested journalist at the New York Times. So you can either tell us what happened, or you can tell the whole world. I was bluffing. The phone wasn't recording anything. But Victoria didn't know that. Her composure shattered. Her perfect facade crumbled. And then, with tears streaming down her face, she told us everything. "Your father was supposed to die that night," Victoria said, her voice hollow. "That's what Thomas Blackwood wanted. A clean elimination. No witnesses, no evidence, no loose ends." "But?" I pressed. "But one of the men, his name was Gerald, he couldn't do it. He was supposed to kill your father and dispose of the body, but at the last moment, he couldn't pull the trigger. So he made a deal instead. He would stage the death, make it look like the job was done, and your father would disappear. New identity. New life. Far away from anyone who might recognize him." My heart stopped. Are you saying my father is alive?" Victoria nodded slowly. "He was when I last checked. 5 years ago. Living in a small town in Montana under a different name. The world tilted on its axis. My father was alive. For 20 years, I had believed he was dead. For 20 years, I had mourned him, blamed myself, wondered if there was something I could have done to save him. And he had been alive this whole time. Why didn't he come back?" I whispered. "Why didn't he find me?" "He couldn't. Part of the deal was that he could never contact his old life again. If he did, they would kill him for real. And they would kill his family too." Victoria's eyes met mine. "He stayed away to protect you." 3 days later, I was on a plane to Montana. Damien had wanted to come with me, but I needed to do this alone. This was my father. My journey. My reckoning. The town was small, barely a speck on the map. One main street, a handful of shops, a church with a white steeple. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers stuck out like sore thumbs. The address Victoria had given me led to a modest house on the edge of town. Blue shutters. A garden out front. A pickup truck in the driveway. I stood at the gate for what felt like hours, unable to move. And then the front door opened. He was older, of course he was older, it had been 20 years, but I recognized him immediately. The same gentle eyes. The same crooked smile. The same way of standing with his hands in his pockets, like he was never quite sure what to do with them. "Daddy." The word came out before I could stop it. A child's word. A word I hadn't used in 2 decades. His face crumpled. "Evie?" And then I was running across the yard, running up the steps, running into arms that wrapped around me and held me tighter than anything had ever held me before. "I'm sorry," he sobbed into my hair. "I'm so sorry. Every day, I wanted to come back. Every day, I wanted to find you. But I couldn't. I couldn't risk." "I know," I said. "I know. It's okay. I'm here now. I'm here." We stood there, holding each other, making up for 20 years of lost time. I stayed in Montana for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of getting to know my father again. 2 weeks of stories, of explanations, of healing. He told me about the night he was taken, the terror, the certainty that he was going to die. He told me about Gerald, the man who had saved his life, who had risked everything to give him a second chance. He told me about the years of hiding, of loneliness, of watching me from afar through carefully planted intermediaries who would bring him news and photos. "I kept every picture," he said, showing me a box filled with images of me at various ages. Graduation photos. Birthday candids. Random snapshots from social media. "I watched you grow up, even if I couldn't be there." My heart shattered and rebuilt itself 1,000 times during those 2 weeks. But eventually, I had to go back. Back to the city. Back to Damien. Back to the life I had built. And back to the unfinished business with the Blackwood legacy. Damien had been busy while I was gone. With Victoria's confession recorded and verified, he had gone to the authorities himself, not to expose his father's crimes, but to make amends for them. He had opened the sealed records, provided evidence, cooperated fully with the investigation. Blackwood Industries will never be the same, he said when I returned. The stock has crashed. The media is having a field day. Everything my family built is crumbling. And Victoria? Under arrest. Along with several others who were involved in the cover-up. He paused. Including Gerald. Gerald saved my father's life. I know. And I've hired the best lawyers to make sure his cooperation is taken into account. But justice has to be served, Evelyn. For your father. For everyone else who was hurt by my family's sins. I looked at him, this man who had lost everything, who had torn down his own legacy to make things right. What about you? I asked. What about me? What happens to you now? He smiled sadly. I don't know. I've spent my whole life building something that turned out to be built on blood. I have no idea who I am without Blackwood Industries. I took his hand. Then maybe it's time to find out. 1 year later, I stood on the beach in the Caribbean, the same beach where Damien had told me to start writing, and looked out at the sunset. So much had changed. Blackwood Industries had been restructured, its assets sold off and divided among the victims of the original crimes. The money that went to my father was more than he would ever need, but he donated most of it to charity, keeping only enough to live comfortably in Montana. Damien had started over. A new company, smaller and cleaner, focused on sustainable technology. He had changed his last name, taken his mother's maiden name, Henderson, and devoted himself to building something he could be proud of. And me? I had written my story. All of it. The childhood trauma. The chance meeting with a billionaire. The night I screamed and everything changed. The search for my father. The reunion. The healing. It was published 6 months ago. A memoir that became a bestseller, that started conversations about family and legacy and the lies we tell ourselves to survive. I was no longer Evelyn Carter, the broke waitress who dreamed of writing. I was Evelyn Carter, author. Survivor. Woman who had stared into the darkness and found light on the other side. What are you thinking about? I turned. Damien Henderson now, was walking toward me across the sand, 2 glasses of champagne in his hands. Everything, I said. Nothing. How strange life is. How it never goes the way you expect. He handed me a glass and stood beside me, looking out at the water. Any regrets? I thought about it. Really thought about it. The pain. The betrayal. The moments when I had wanted to give up, when the weight of the truth seemed too heavy to bear. And then I thought about my father, alive and happy in Montana. About the book that had helped so many people. About the man standing beside me, who had given up everything to do what was right. No, I said finally. No regrets. He smiled. And then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. My heart stopped. I had a speech prepared, he said, but I've forgotten every word of it. So I'll just say this, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You saved me from a life I didn't know I needed saving from. And I want to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, nothing like the gaudy diamond Victoria had worn. Evelyn Carter, will you marry me? I looked at the ring. At the man. At the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. And I said yes. Epilogue, the final twist. The wedding was small. Just family and close friends, on my father's property in Montana. The garden he had planted had bloomed into something beautiful, and we exchanged vows under an arch of wildflowers as the sun set behind the mountains. It was perfect. Everything was perfect. Until 2 months later, when I found the letter. It was hidden in the attic of our new house, tucked inside an old book that had belonged to Damien's mother. I was cleaning, preparing the room to become my writing studio, when the envelope fell out and landed at my feet. I picked it up. Read my name on the front. To Evelyn Carter. My blood ran cold. I opened the letter with shaking hands. My dear Evelyn. If you're reading this, it means my plan has worked. It means you have found your father, fallen in love with my son, and become part of the family. You think this was all coincidence? You think fate brought you and Damien together? Sweet child. There is no such thing as fate. There is only design. Your father was never supposed to die. That was always the plan, to spare him, to give him a new life, to create a debt that would one day be repaid. I knew that someday, his daughter would grow up. I knew that someday, she would need to be neutralized, kept close, kept controlled, kept silent about what she might remember from that night in the park. And what better way to neutralize a threat than to make her family? The wine at the restaurant? One of my people bumped into you. The dress? The gala invitation? All orchestrated. Even Victoria's confrontation was planned, designed to create conflict, to make you trust Damien more when he had chosen you over her. Every moment of your love story was written before you ever met. By the time you read this, I will be long dead. But know that even from the grave, I am watching. The Blackwood legacy does not end with my son's conscience. It evolves. Adapts. Survives. You are not the hero of this story, Evelyn. You are exactly where I wanted you to be. Welcome to the family. Thomas Blackwood. The letter fell from my hands. I sat there, in the dusty attic, feeling the walls close in around me. Everything I had believed, about fate, about love, about the choices that had led me here, was a lie. I was not the author of my own story. I was a character in someone else's. And the real question, the question that would haunt me for the rest of my life, was this. If Thomas Blackwood had planned everything up to this point, what else had he planned that I didn't know about yet? I looked down at my stomach. At the barely visible bump that had appeared 3 weeks ago. At the new life growing inside me, Damien's child. Our child. Or was it? Was even this part of the design? The sun set outside the window. Darkness crept into the room. And I sat there, surrounded by shadows, wondering if I would ever truly be free. The end. Please do not forget to subscribe. Leave your comments below.